City Councilor. I'm also the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Government Operations. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Councilor Baker of District 3, President Ed Flynn of District 2, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor at Large, Councilor Lydia Edwards of District 1, and Councilor Ruth C. Louis Jen, another Councilor at Large. This working session is being recorded. It is being live streamed at bostongov.gov City Council TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Fios Channel 964. Today's working session is on docket number 0222. Message in order for your approval, a home rule petition to the General Court entitled Petition for a Special Law regarding an act relative to real estate transfer fees and senior property tax relief. We're going to be joined today by members of the administration, Commissioner Nicholas Agnello from the Assessing Department, Chief of Housing for the City of Boston, Sheila Dillon, Tim Davis, Deputy Director of Policy for the Mayor's Office of Housing, and I believe I saw Commissioner Emily Shea from the Age Strong Commission. The council previously held a hearing on this docket on February 10th, 2022, where public comment was taken. At the hearing, we reviewed the proposal with the emphasis on how it differs from the 2019 transfer fee proposal passed by the council by a 10-3 vote. As a brief recap, this is a two-pronged proposal to bolster affordable housing in the city. Part one is the creation of a transfer fee to be paid on certain real estate transactions, and part two is an expansion of the current senior property tax relief program. Some of the discussion points from that hearing included whether the petition should use average median income or another system to provide more flexibility and coverage, and the possibility of adding a sliding scale for fees on amounts over $2 million. There was also some concern over the introductory language of the petition, which would allow the state legislature to, quote, vary the form and substance of the requested legislation within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition, end quote. The current language would allow the legislature to make broader changes to the petition as long as it relates to the general objective of housing. For example, as chair, it's my hope that the administration can explain why they believe this language is important and how we can ensure that any changes made by the state are within the stated goal of the petition. And before going to my council colleagues in order of arrival for brief introductory remarks, I received and will read in an absence letter from Councilor Julia Mejia and read that into the record. Dear Mr. Chair and members of the Committee on Government Operations, I'm writing to inform you of my absence from today's hearing in the Committee on Government Operations regarding docket number 0222, a working session regarding a home rule petition relative to real estate transfer fees and senior property tax relief. Due to a previously scheduled engagement, I'm not able to attend. I have previously offered my full support during the hearing on this matter that took place a few weeks ago. I look forward to following up on this conversation and hope to take part in future dialogues. Sincerely, Councilor Julia Mejia. And with that, we'll go to the rest of my council colleagues starting in order of arrival. And so that begins with Councilor Frank Baker of District 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have that much to say, but I would like to talk. I've heard that the governor, and my concern around this is attaching the senior property relief tax. I've heard that the governor has filed legislation to address this here. So I'm wondering if we strip that out and call this the tax that it is. And so we're voting on a tax here. And if we can get into that discussion, if anybody on the city side knows anything about that legislation. I haven't seen the legislation, but I've just heard of it coming out of the governor's office just the other day. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Council President Ed Flynn of District 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your leadership. I want to say thank you to my council colleagues as well for their leadership, Mayor Wu, but also the administration officials that are on the call as well, at this meeting as well. I support this proposal, and the reason I support it is I want to make sure long-time residents of the city, especially our seniors, persons with disability, immigrant families, but want to make sure that they also have the opportunity to stay in Boston, in a city they love, that they helped build. I know I've been working closely with Sheila Dillon on this issue as well, but I support this because I want to make sure that longtime residents also have an opportunity to be assisted, to be helped out by city government especially during these difficult financial times. But we need to make sure that there's a place in Boston for our seniors. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, President Flynn. Councillor Flaherty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just have a quick question. Can I dive into some suggested changes, or how would you like to proceed as chair?
So absolutely, you could dive into some suggested changes. I just want to give folks a chance to do opening statements if they have them, and then we'll do that. So do you have anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. Yeah, no. So I have sort of specific language sgestions, but I can dive into that. But so I didn't hear the first part of it. So my apologies for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, look forward to the hearing, and want to make sure that obviously what we're intending to do doesn't have any sort of adverse or unintended consequences. And specifically speaking to that, the lifelong resident, the person that's owned their property for 20, 25, 30, 35 years. And they've, amassed, obviously, could be their retirement, it could be a nest egg, it could be an opportunity for them to pass on to their children or grandchildren. They can borrow on it, help pay tuitions, et cetera. So I want to make sure if the target here is the flipper, I want to make sure that that's sort of that intended purpose, that we stay sort of on that flipper and not catch up in that net people who've owned their property for a significant period of time, particularly our elderly who are owner occupied, in many instances over house, but they're in their homes, and all the properties around them, those values have skyrocketed, the sale prices have skyrocketed, and then they get caught up in that, and their property values and their taxes go up. So just trying to identify ways that we can sort of carve out, I guess, exemptions, as many exemptions as possible for our fixed income seniors and/or for folks who have owned their homes for a long period of time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look forward to the hearing.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Edwards, followed by Councillor Louis Jen. And I just want to also note that we've been joined by Councillor Worrell of District 4 and Councillor Aaron Murphy, City Councillor at Large, and that will be the order. Councillor Edwards, followed by Councillor Louis Jen, followed by Councillor Worrell, followed by Councillor Murphy. Thank you. Floor is yours, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. I'm excited about this conversation. I think that this is not, I would like to characterize this as a housing stabilization home rule petition, and because we're dealing with both sides, we're both raising the revenue that we need in order to pay for housing, and we do need money to pay for housing, and we're also making sure that people who are already housed have a vehicle to stay more stably housed. So to me, it's a comprehensive conversation, and that's why the two need to stay together. This isn't just a tax bill. This is about keeping people in their homes or generating the revenue that we need in order to get more people housed. I'm excited about this conversation. I just want to remind people, many of us were there in 2019 when we had this conversation before, and it passed out of the council with a vote of 10-3 under the Walsh administration. I just sent to the chair and to the committee, to Christine O'Donnell, the report commissioned by the Walsh administration in 2019 discussing the fiscal health of a transfer fee and looking at the varying stages of that up to 2% and how much money that the city of Boston would be able to generate. I also wanted to note, we are an outlier in this. 38 states have transfer fees, and many more localities have a version of a transfer fee in order to generate funds and money for their locality. So this is actually pretty normal, and I think it's actually a wonderful opportunity for us to take the time and effort to generate some funds while we can, to stably house our seniors and provide a tax break while we can, and overall move towards more housing stability and policies that allow us to do this. I think Councillor Baker, just putting on the other hat, because I was at in discussion on the other side about the governor's budget. Yes, you are correct. There are several tax breaks that are coming involved in the governor's budget, specifically one for renters, also for landlords, and then also for seniors. I don't believe that this would be in conflict of it. If in anything, we might be actually offering more. There is the increase in the tax exemption, which I think he's going to 3,000. I don't know if we're going as high, but I did want to answer what I could, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Louis Jen.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here in support of this home rule petition and making sure that we are doing everything we can to create more avenues to fund affordable housing. It's unfortunate that this hasn't passed, but now we have another bite at the apple. I am excited to have a conversation about what this looks like and about what is the best process here to move forward. We live in a city that is increasingly unequal between the haves and the have-nots, and this is just one way of us extracting some of the wealth that has been created from a speculative market that has too often sidelined poor folks, Black and brown folks in our city, working class residents who are being pushed out of our city because it's too expensive. So getting this money to the Neighborhood Housing Trust, and also helping, we're all city councils, we get calls all the time from seniors about property taxes, and being able to address those concerns through this home rule petition, I think is great as well. So happy to be here and to be with the administration to sort out the best way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Louis-Jean. Councilor Orell, followed by Councilor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm excited to have this conversation. As a newly elected, just coming off the campaign trail, housing was one of the top things I heard, is how do we create more affordable housing? And then another big issue I heard was, property taxes for our seniors. So I'm excited to have this conversation and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Worrell. Councilor Murphy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for everyone who's on this call. No opening statements now, just happy to be listening and being informed. So when we move forward with this, that I have the information I need to make the right decision. So thank you so much for having this hearing.
Thank you. And I'm now going to give it to the administration to sort of speak on the home rule petition and sort of the points that they believe they'd like to emphasize right now. And then we'll go into, rather than going through the whole home rule petition, which everybody should at this point have, and I'm hoping that the study that was conducted has already also been put in your inboxes. But the goal here is that the administration can speak to the importance of this, why it's crafted the way it's crafted, and then we can get into, by order of arrival, folks can then give any changes that they'd like to see or any language that they dislike, rather than just running through the entire thing and saying, everybody go with this paragraph, everybody go with this paragraph. We'll just let folks go towards whatever they're trying to suggest. And so with that, I'm going to kick it over to the administration in whatever order you have determined for yourselves.
So I thank you so much. And I do want to thank the City Council and Councilor Arroyo for having this very quickly. This has been moving at a very good pace, because I think we all recognize the need is so great. For the record, Sheila Dillon, Chief of Housing for the City of Boston. And I won't, we had a hearing just a week ago or so I won't read those remarks again, but just highlight a couple of things. I agree with Councilor Edwards. I do see this as a stabilization bill. This would potentially double the amount of resources we have to create new affordable housing and preserve affordable housing in our city, which is just, it's sort of amazing that this legislation that impacts very few properties, just over 700 transactions last year would have been impacted, can double our budget and create affordable housing throughout the city and provide the necessary tax relief so seniors can stay in their homes more comfortably. We have been we've been very interested in making sure that people that own an asset, that they want to pass on the proceeds of that asset to their families, are not impacted. And that is why in this version, we're exempting the first 2 million. So we think that really does address a lot of that issue. And still, even with exempting that first 2 million, it raises so much income. But I will certainly, we're here. We want to help shape this. We want to listen to your comments. We want to send the strongest bill we can up to the State House and get this passed once and for all. And I'll just leave you with this. I was reading the Globe editorial on, I think, last Saturday, and it ends with this paragraph, which I loved, and it said, Boston does want to solve its housing issues. We just need to be given the tools to do so. And I think it was very fitting. So I'll end with that. And hand it over to any of my colleagues that want to speak as well. Thank you so much for having this hearing.
Thank you, Sheila. And councilors, great to be here. Neil Doherty, Chief of Staff, Intergovernmental Relations. Wanted to just talk quickly about why we've formatted it the way we have. So this home rule is written to go up to the State House amendable, meaning that if there are changes at the State House, they would be made and passed by those bodies and then signed by the governor in that way. As many of you know, the transfer fee has been a topic of conversation both on the city level and the state level for years now. And we've sent one up in 19 and even before. So what we're hoping to do is send this up amendable because there are several municipalities in the Commonwealth that are interested in a transfer fee bill with different, possible routes to doing so. There's also a statewide bill that is up there. But as you all know, Boston's a bit different. We have a good number of properties that could be taken that would apply to this legislation. And basically, as things move forward at the state, we want to make sure that Boston is in the mix, and we are allowed the opportunity to be given the authority to take this step to support our housing needs here in the city. So that is why we have it amendable, because things can change up there so quickly. I will say, though, that this gives the city of Boston the authority to impose a transfer fee on real estate transactions. Once signed by the governor, it doesn't mean that there is one that goes into effect the next day, for instance. It has to come back to the city. It has to come back to the Boston City Council to create an ordinance that allows us to put in different exemptions. It allows us to set the the fee structure, how those dollars can be spent to some degree. And that's largely what will have to happen. Knock on wood, we get this passed up at the state. It does come back to this body. Councilor Flaherty, you mentioned exemptions for families or other folks. That's something that would happen at that next step. I think right now we're looking for the authority for the city to have a vehicle to create more dollars for housing, and that's what this provides. And hopefully, in the near future, we're back in a working session to create the ordinance that really sets this up. So, just to be clear, that's why we're hoping to send it up amendable for any minor tweaks the state may have. But the real meat of what we're going to do is going to come through this body in the future. Commissioner or Tim, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on other pieces.
None at this time. Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. My name's Commissioner Nick Arenello. I'm the Commissioner of the Assessing Department for the City of Boston. I don't have an enormous amount to add on top of what my colleagues have already said and kind of what we discussed during the hearing the other week. I do have a couple of really quick thoughts on some of the items that were brought up by a couple of the counselors just now in the introductions. Councilor Flaherty, I think brought up a really interesting point about, exemptions and long-term home ownership. And I just want to kind of draw everyone's attention to the really big change that we made to this version over the last version, which is that exemption of $2 million. And that's an exemption on every transaction. So to just kind of run through a quick example of what that would mean. So let's say it's years down the road and someone's property appreciates to $3 million, which is a significant amount of money. And they are probably doing pretty well, but maybe everything has gone up and maybe the value of the dollar drops dramatically or something. That $3 million doesn't mean what it means right now. Even so, if we implemented the full 2% transfer fee, which again, to Neil's point, is something that we would have to implement by ordinance after it's passed. So it's not a given that we would even have that full 2% transfer fee. But if we did implement the full 2% transfer fee, the impact on that $3 million transfer is only 2% on the amount of the sales price over $2 million. So what that in effect amounts to is a $20,000 fee, which is the equivalent of 2/3 of 1%. for that property transfer. And so this really is a fee that it's going to apply. The way it is set up is to provide the city with a revenue source off of extremely high value transfers. It's not really something that's going to impact condos. It's not going to impact single families. It's going to have a very minimal impact even on multifamilies. We're really talking about high value commercial properties that this is gonna hit. The other thing that I wanted to address was Councilor Baker's point about having the senior exemption language kind of tied to the transfer fee, and kind of the thinking behind that. And that's really that we really want to draw attention to the fact that the point of this package of laws is to address tax assistance in housing. And that's the objective. The money from the transfer fees for housing. The point of the senior exemption increase is to protect people in their homes. And we think those things are really intertwined, and that it's important to keep those together. So that's all I have, but happy to answer any questions that come up.
Thank you all. With that, I'm going to go in order of appearance to councilors' questions, or so this is questions and or language. I know Councilor Flaherty brought that up earlier, but if you have language changes or questions that you have, or both, this is the time to do that and to raise those points. And I will go at the end of the line here. But starting with Councilor Baker, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if this, if it's amendable and it conflicts with state law, would the state strip out the language for the senior tax relief? Does anybody know? Someone from the administration?
What by conflicts with state law? I mean, this would be to allow us to change.
No,
the
I know,
state
but if the governor just filed for senior tax relief, there's something up there now. Would this conflict with that? So
this they would all move together through the legislative process, and then whatever would come out at the end is what would become the law.
Yeah, and so I'm hearing a couple different things here. We're tying this tax in to senior tax relief, but then we're talking about affordable housing. What is it? Are we gonna provide tax relief, or are we gonna provide affordable housing? Well, I mean, because go ahead.
No, we're hoping that this passes and we'll be able to do both. We're hoping that we'll be able to provide tax relief to seniors that need it and create a lot of affordable housing, including new senior housing, so that seniors that don't own a home or can no longer stay in their home will have an affordable place to go. So, I mean, I think the administration's hope is that both things will be accomplished.
Well, I had a 2% alcohol tax a couple years ago that failed in the city council, and councilors got up and they said they'd like to see it be more prescriptive, meaning we'd like to see a better way. Where is this actually going to be spent? So affordable housing coming into the city with what we spend this year, $70 million on something, like, where is our ROI on this? Like, how much money are we going to throw towards affordable housing going into the housing trust? And I still can't get people into any apartments, like no luck at all. People that I work with for years cannot get them in apartments. So this to me just seems like another bottomless barrel, and I think the tie-in in the senior tax relief is disingenuous. I think we hanging around senior tax relief when it's another tax here. And I appreciate the fact that now it's everything above the $2 million, and we're trying to do some exemptions, but I'm still not sold on this. It's high inflation. At what point do we think as a group, the whole real estate scene is going to say, okay, Boston's done. We're not doing business there anymore because the tax, more and more things, we're going after IDP. We're going to lower the 10 units. At every turn, we're hammering the real estate industry. And are they making money? Yes, they are. But they're also paying for everything that's happening in the city, all our libraries, all our parks. As a homeowner, that's me also. And I hope my property is worth 2 million at some point. And what about the person that may have started in a 3-decker, moved to a single family or a 2-family, but still owns that 3-decker that's part of their retirement? We're going to go after them also. Don't forget, because when you sell that property, if you bought it for $250,000, you've got capital gains on everything over that. So the government now is going to get what, 30 or 40% of your sale price. And then the city of Boston comes in and says, oh, we need our share. At what point does it end? In a time of inflation, in a time of raising interest rates, in a time where people are struggling here. So, you know, I am concerned, like Council Flaherty, about the small person, because it's never the big guys that get hurt. It's always the small people that get hurt. The small investor that maybe takes 500 less on apartments. So I have concerns about this, and I do think that we should strip out the senior tax relief, because I think it's disingenuous. We're trying to use the seniors now to get a tax passed, and let's call it what it is. It's a tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Council President Flynn, the floor is yours if you have any questions or suggested changes. And then after Councilor Flynn is Councilor Flaherty, and then Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to thank Neil Doherty too for that explanation. It was very helpful to me in learning the process and knowing about the process. So I want to say thank you to Neil. My question, I guess maybe it's to Sheila Dillon. So Sheila, how would this impact, if at all, you know, our support for public housing, BHA? Certainly there's a huge waiting list. And when these homes are sold, sometimes the 2 families or 3 families are triple deckers, and an elderly person is displaced, put on a waiting list, maybe at BHA. But would there be any financial assistance to support residents in Boston Housing Authority, or supporting public housing? I probably should know the answer to that, but just wanted to see what your thoughts are.
No, the money that would be raised through the transfer fee, the vast majority of it would go to the Neighborhood Housing Trust, and the Neighborhood Housing Trust is set up in such a way that it can support. And Councilor Edwards is on the Housing Trust, so you know, she could also probably speak to this. But it can support new production and preservation, including public housing. And we know, I'm really heartened that a lot of our senior public housing is getting renovated right now, and a lot of that is city dollars. Council President Flynn, you're right. There's a lot of, especially in your district right now, I'm seeing a lot of seniors being displaced because of the high cost of housing, and a lot of triple deckers are changing hands. And so we really do need to create more public housing using fair cloth and other means, but also just more senior housing that is affordable to seniors that are getting displaced throughout Boston. So, you know, yes, it can support the BHA preservation and new public housing, and it can support just new affordable housing created by nonprofits, et cetera. So yes to both. That's why it's such an important resource.
Thank you, Sheila, for that explanation. It's helpful. I support this proposal. I want to make sure that residents of Boston, especially longtime residents, seniors, immigrant families, persons with disabilities, are able to stay in the city. Certainly, I want to see more affordable housing built as well. But I just want to say thank you to you, Sheila, and your team. But I have no further questions, Chair Arroyo.
Thank you, President Flynn. Councilor Flaherty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see Sheila, Neil, and Nick. Appreciate the work you guys are doing. and look forward to continuing working with you all. A couple of things I know this legislation is very similar to what we passed in 19, but the key difference obviously was the version that exempts the first 2 million, which obviously I think that was an improvement on that. I have a suggestion, which would be, and I don't have Mr. Chair, I don't have a red line version in front of you, but if you just indulge, just read through what I'm thinking in terms of Section 3, exempted value. It states that, quote, the amount of the purchase price exempted by the transfer fee may be adjusted by the city council.
You're coming in and out.
Approval of the mayor every 5 years based on increased in the median sales price for all properties. Oh, sorry.
So let me, here's what I'll do. I'll read that
Three.
section. I'll read that section out loud, and then if I miss anything, you can come right back in. So the sentence that Councilor Flaherty was reading was in Section 3, exempted value. Specifically the sentence, the amount of the purchase price exempted from the transfer fee may be adjusted by the city council with the approval of the mayor every 5 years based on the percentage increase in the median citywide sales price for all properties, but shall not be reduced. That was the sentence there. Councilor Flowers.
That's great. Yes, and then the question is this a section that the administration would be open to amending to allow for a sliding scale, more regular changes in the exempted value that are more in line with Boston's real estate trends? So we're not, especially our long-term homeowners and our senior fixed income homeowners. And so, for example, right now it's 2 million. So maybe in a few years it should be 2.5. Maybe a few years after that it should be 3 million. After that it should be 3.5, because the values, obviously Boston's values are going to continue to grow. We have a great city. We've got the best colleges and universities and network of hospitals and health centers in the world. Life sciences is looking for an additional 13 million square feet. Financial services, I mean, we're well positioned coming out of this pandemic, but just in general, we're the envy of cities across the country because of our natural resources, our brain power. So property values are going to continue to increase. And I just want to make sure that the sliding exemptions, or the exemptions slide with those increases, again, so that we're not punishing that lifelong resident, the person that's owned their property, that's not in the business of flipping and flopping, particularly our fixed income seniors, our veterans, folks that have worked their entire lives that were able to purchase their home, were able to borrow on it, repair it, educate their children on it, etc. And it's theirs. And instead of just reaching in and putting another fee or another tax onto something, let's be a little bit more sort of judicious on the sliding exemptions and weave them in. So we did weave in the 2 million, which I thought was a great start. Just wondering if the administration would also consider sort of a sliding scale as Boston's real estate continues to grow and the prices continue to rise, that the homeowner gets that benefit as well.
So this is Tim Davis, Deputy Director for Policy Development and Research. I think that was our intent with that provision, was to make sure that it doesn't stay at 2 million and start to grab all kinds of properties over time that it shouldn't. I think, are you asking us to, one, I think you're asking us to look at what kind of exemptions we would have. Again, that is something that we can work out in the ordinance that would implement this later on. In terms of this particular sentence, are you suggesting that we revise it maybe every 3 years rather than every 5 years? I think that
exactly. That's right, Tim.
Okay.
And thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. I didn't see that you were on. I'm joining by phone. But,
sure, Councilor.
Always good to talk to you. But thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe instead of it having to be the 5 years, maybe it's a 3-year update, and then we make these, the adjustment accordingly if that's where the real estate trends are taking us. We always want to make sure that the person that's owned their home for an extended period of time don't get caught up in this transfer fee.
Okay.
And the second issue, Mr. Chair, was that this home rule petition doesn't distinguish between, from what I'm reading anyways, and correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't distinguish between residential and commercial properties. So are we concerned that the impact that this may have on commercial properties, and whether there'll be a chilling effect? Many of these businesses are sort of just still struggling. as we're sort of coming through the pandemic. And then now on top of this, because there's no distinguish between residential, commercial, I did not hear a distinction. So I would like to sort of get a sense as to our commercial properties involved in this as well.
And there you go. So just there's a little in and out there, but I just want to make sure we're clear on what you're asking. You're asking whether or not this transfer fee tax applies to commercial properties as well as residential properties, or if there's an exclusion of commercial properties and it's just residential. Is that the ask?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. And obviously the concern about a chilling effect with our businesses and their investment and their partnership with our city, particularly as they're coming out of a pandemic and many of these businesses are struggling and or on the verge of going out of business.
Thank you, Councilor Reddy. I'm going to kick that over to the administration on that, which is whether or not this is separating commercial and residential. In other words, is commercial exempt from this? And then the second aspect of that, which is if commercial is not exempt from this, which I believe it is not exempt from this, then does it have a chilling effect? And I believe that's studied. Maybe you can go into that.
Correct. The commercial, so given 2021 sales, we looked like that there was about 700 properties that this would affect. Overwhelmingly, these were mostly high-end condos. There was only 75 commercial and industrial properties that were covered by this and 30 mixed-use properties. And looking at the actual data, these are mostly the big projects that are selling. These are, the downtown commercial buildings. These are not the mom and pop kind of operations that we would be getting these money off of. So there's some real cash for us out of those projects, but also these are really big projects that we think could afford it.
Thank you for that. Does that answer your question, Councilor Clark?
Just two quick It does, and then I just Sheila had mentioned I think that it was somewhere in the vicinity of 700 properties. So I guess I'd like to get a sense as to could someone provide me with the number of properties that would have been impacted by the 2019 version if it had passed? And then provide me with the estimate number of properties that will be impacted. You follow that, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, we got the last part of that.
Yeah,
so I got you. You were coming in real scratchy, but the last part I think we got. Tell me if this is the gist of everything you were trying to get, which is, can the administration tell you how many properties would have been impacted by this based on if we had gotten the 2019 version of this passed, and now on this one, how many actually pay the fee on this? I believe is what you're asking. How many properties would have paid? Yep. So
yes, we can supply that, but I would say that it's actually exactly the same number of properties because it went from being a 2 million trigger to a 2 million exemption. So what the properties would pay is less under our current proposal, but the number of properties affected is actually exactly the same as it would have been under the 2019.
Tim, we can get over to the counselor though, yes, what those properties would pay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Because just for my clarity, because the difference is basically that the first 2 million would have been taxed in the first original version, and now they're completely exempted. So it's every dollar after 2 million that gets taxed.
Right.
Yes.
We can provide that. Yes.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, for deciphering that. You've done a great job. I'm sorry with my reception. And just lastly, this is more to Neil. Neil, my concern is having it be amendable. We're elected in Boston. Me in particular, I represent the entire city. My district colleagues, obviously our mayor. We're elected to make decisions on for the people of Boston. And I always have concerns when we're leaving that up to a state rep from Amesbury or Chicopee Falls or Leominster to make decisions on what's best for Boston. We know our neighborhoods. We know our city better than anybody. And why we send up an amendable document will always be a head scratcher for me. And I really think we should draw the line in the sand on this. This is our city. These are the folks that we represent. And this is what we're doing, which we think is in the best interest of our residents. And let the Chicopee Falls state reps and the senators from Ludlow and Leominster, and let them do what's best for their neighborhoods and their constituents. We don't get in the middle of that. And that's all I'm asking. When you send an amendable document up to Beacon Hill, anything can happen to it. It's like making a sausage. It can come out completely different. So while we're on this hearing, very important hearing, and we're discussing to make some changes and to upgrade this and change that and move this over there. Once it goes up there, it's out of our hands. Anything can happen. And that's all. I'm just going to opine on that. That has to stop. Thank you for everybody. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for assisting me here.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. And when it gets to my turn, I'll talk a little bit about that amendment myself. But Councilor Edwards, followed by Councilor Louis Jen, followed by Councilor Worrell, followed by Councilor Murphy. So Councilor Edwards.
Great, thank you so much. I mean, I think, Councilor Flaherty speaks to the frustration that we all have, or at least half of me has, when it comes to home rule petitions, in terms of the fact that we have consistently, when it comes to our housing, our zoning policies, when we want huge changes, we are unique in that the city of Boston has to go to the State House. When we want to hold the ZBA accountable, as you'll recall, we passed that home rule petition, and that needed to go to the State House to even add an urban planner and to add an environmentalist on the ZBA. This is similar to our linkage that we passed out of this body. And we, again, had to go, in order for us to extract more money from commercial development, we had to again go ask the state of Massachusetts for permission because Boston zoning is unique. I look forward to maybe a home rule petition coming from this body where we just basically end home rule petitions for our zoning. But just a hint or suggestion to my colleagues who will be here after I leave. That is the conversation overall that I completely agree with Councilor Flaherty on. There's a certain level of Boston needing to be able to do it without having to seek permission. But that's not the system we have right now. So we do need to seek permission. And I think in many cases, what makes it easier for the State House to allow for something to pass is the fact that it's amendable. They have used the unjust cause eviction, the fact that it wasn't amendable, as an excuse to say, oh, we could have fixed it, but oh well. So I think in many cases, they use the fact that we are sticking to our language as a sword or as an attack for them to say we're being the unreasonable ones. It's going to be amendable. And I think it's important that it's amendable because it allows for the conversation. We can't deny that conversation. But I want to be very clear and to bring back to what Councilor Doherty, my apologies, to what Neil Doherty said earlier, which is this is about permission and guidelines. That's all the State House is going to give us. The actual conversation of if we choose to ultimately entertain and have a transfer fee, what it looks like, who's exempt from it, if there's going to be a step-in process, all of that comes back here to the Boston City Council. That's where we flex our muscle and that's where we get to it. That's exactly the conversation we're having when it comes to linkage. We actually put into we actually have a process where we are required to do some economic analysis, and we're going back and forth with that right now as we speak to ultimately get to a higher linkage process. So I personally think that this is a fair, one of the scriveners of the original version had the full $2 million being applied. But this exemption, again, is one of those compromises that you make in order to move legislation forward. I do want the administration to answer, not right now, but at least to explain the difference in the money that we'd be making if the full $2 million was not exempted. Because I remember I thought it was $100 million a year, or $120 million a year with the full million. And now we're still at, it looks like $100 million. So I'm wondering if there's been a narrowing down of that income. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you could just compare the 2019 to the 2022 version of this, that would be great on the income that we would be making. I also wanted to note and ask the administration, could you, at one point during one of our housing committee hearings, myself and then Councilor Janey asked, how much would it take? How much would it cost to house people in the city of Boston or to eliminate levels of homelessness? And there was a price tag to that. And I can't imagine, I would love to get that number back again, and then to show that by doubling that amount on an annual basis, and this isn't a one-time transfer fee, this is annually what we're expected to bring in, close to $100 million, how we could actually be funding and putting that money to good work immediately to house people. I sit on the Housing Trust. I want to be very clear, the number one people in line for the money that we gain through linkage and through hopefully this transfer fee are developers. I'll repeat myself. The number one people who come in for the housing trust money are developers who want to build in Boston. So this is actually setting up a kitty to build in Boston, to build affordably in Boston. This money will be recycled immediately into building affordable housing and subsidizing it so that the rents are lower, so that there's more home ownership opportunities. Again, that's where the money can go into first-time homeowners. As you saw, we increased the down payment assistance the city has given. All of these different things are going to help to fund the commitments we made. I was there. I think Councilor Arroyo was there, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Flaherty. We're all there when we stood in front of Maha and got pie dishes because we believe that we should create 1,000 new homeowners in 5 years. We agreed to do that in the city of Boston. We're not going to do that without this kind of money that we need from the transfer fee. I made that commitment. I'm trying to stick to my word. I hope my colleagues are as well. And I believe homeownership is also the one of the other major legs in the stool of housing stabilization. I also want to be very clear. The flexibility that Councilor Flaherty is talking about is a conversation that happens only after the transfer fee passes at the State House. It comes back to the city of Boston and the permissions and guidelines, the guideline number one being it caps it at a certain percentage. We can't go above that, but who is exempted from it? That's where the city of Boston and councils will be able to exempt as many people and as all different kinds of exemptions, homeowners, so on and so forth. We can have that conversation. We're not going to have any conversation about this in a real way or pass anything unless we get this out of the city council now and out of the State House. So I'm personally very excited about this. I look forward to, and no, I'm it's just me, but I am not nobody when it comes over to the State House to be able to catch this home rule petition, Councilor Flaherty. And I stand by, 100% your concern about the autonomy of this great city being able to build for itself, to be able to pay for itself. And I want nothing more than this home rule petition to go through to allow for us to do that.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. It is now Councilor Louis-Jean, followed by Councilor Well, followed by Councilor Murphy. And this is any questions and or suggested edits or just food for thought that you would like to offer for folks. Councilor Louis-Jean, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to say a lot of what I, was going to say was captured a lot by the frustration that both Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Edwards expressed when it comes to the amendability of this home rule petition. I think, I'm not sure, someone from the administration said something about this being allowing them to make minor tweaks, but the language as written is broader than that. It's more than just minor tweaks. It would allow them to, may reasonably, provided that the legislator may reasonably vary the form and substance of the requested legislation within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition. So my fear that there are tweaks that are substantive, that are deeper cuts into this home rule petition than we want to see, especially because I feel like this current home rule petition gives a lot more, having the two prior ones failing, this home rule petition, reduces the overall pot of money. If that's not correct, someone correct me, but reduces the overall part of money that we could get because the $2 million is no longer a trigger, it's an exemption. So we've already, I think, made a lot of concessions for us to get money into our pot for affordable housing. I'm just curious as to why we feel like we need to give a mile here and make it more amendable when we've significantly, it looks like, done a really great job of trying to make it passable as is, right? So to me, it's like, it sort of seems like it would be an either or. Either the way you advance it as it was and have it be completely amendable, or you give a lot of room and have it be just for actually minor tweaks. So I support the home rule petition. I think that we need money for affordable housing. The idea of being able to end homelessness, of putting money into the neighborhood housing trust for, affordable home ownership, rental opportunities, community land trust, that's all really great. I'm just, concerned, are we giving more than we need to here into this home rule petition? But, I'm, as a new city councilor, I know that this has already been through prior iterations and probably thinkings around strategy and what makes sense. I just want to make sure we're not losing more money than we need to.
Council, that's a fantastic point. And I think largely we have sent this up before unamendable, and the vast majority of home rules that are sent from the council up to the state are non-amendable because they're largely like a fix that we need or something that's very specific that is very much largely a simple thing that we want to do. There are, because of this conversation being Commonwealth-wide and so many municipalities being part of the in the mix on the transfer fee piece, it's likely that the state would do something that touch everyone, and we want to be in that pot, right? We want the city of Boston to have the authority to levy the transfer fee, and at the end of the day, it does come back to the city council for us to create an ordinance that provides the levers that we want to see. We feel as the administration that its best chance of passage is to move it forward amendable, and in the event that they send something back, it does land with the city council and the administration to put together the ordinance that allows us to file something and support something that we would all agree with through the ordinance package.
Thanks, Neil. I understand that. I understand that it comes back to the city council and we'll be able to make, we know whatever we send and whatever comes out of the State House would set a ceiling, right? And so just trying to make sure that we are, getting the best ceiling possible.
Thank you, Councilor Lujan. Anything else there? I don't want to cut you off before you're done.
No, that's all.
Thank you, Councilor Lujan. I just want to note we've been joined by Councilor Braden as well. And so Councilor Worrell, followed by Councilor Murphy, followed by Councilor Braden. And this is for questions, comments, any suggested edits or changes. Councilor Worrell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my questions have been asked, but I do want to echo what Councilor Flaherty was saying regarding that last sentence in section 3. It says may be adjusted. Is there any way that we can make sure that it is being adjusted? I don't know if there's anything in the language that says shall be adjusted every 3 years. Is that something that we can do just to make sure that it is getting adjusted to keep up with the rising costs in housing?
So I don't think that's a question for me. I think it's a question for the administration. I would just say from where I'm at, I do think that the reason that it's may instead of shall is in case for some reason property values don't do what we expect property values to do, which is rise. We wouldn't necessarily raise it if property values went down. But I do think, I hope that's unlikely. I think generally it is unlikely with Boston properties, but I'll send that over to the administration. I don't know if Neil or Chief, or go ahead, Councilor.
And that was my other question, is just if real estate properties don't do what we expect them to do, is there anything in this that can point to it being adjusted so it's not a catch-all? That's not catching all the properties.
For the first point, I think the administration is definitely open to changing it to 3 years, but to Councilor Arroyo's point, in the event that it goes down, like the market goes down, it says that we have to raise it. So I wouldn't want to make you all have to increase the fee. So, but it should be on whether it's government operations or housing's, mind every 3 years to bring this back up. And, if the conversation should definitely happen. But changing it to shall would just require the council to increase it, which I'm not sure is necessary every time. You know what I mean?
If I could, I think there could be language and I think this through a little bit, but I think we could agree to a will be evaluated every 3 years, so that there's an actual evaluation taking place every 3 years. And then we don't want to be held to making a change, but I think an evaluation every 3 years is good government and good policy.
I saw that Councilor Edwards had raised her hand, but it seems she agrees with that solution that Chief Dillon presented.
That was going to be my suggestion. I don't want to require to go up. We also may want the flexibility to go down.
So I agree with what Councilor Edwards just said. The flexibility to possibly go down and then the evaluation at least happening every 3 years.
And so that would be to that last sentence, I guess, which is the amount of the purchase price exempted from the transfer fee may be adjusted. I guess that is shall be evaluated, right? Is that the idea by the city council with the approval of the mayor? We changing that to a different set of years, I think I heard earlier, but right now it says 5 years based on the percentage. I think 3 is what we've been talking about, years based on the percentage increase in the median citywide sales price for all properties. But in this part is what Councilor Edwards just presented, but shall not be reduced, is eliminating that language and giving the leaving it as the transfer fee may be evaluated every 3 years, meaning it could go up, it could go down based on what the council or the mayor, well, basically the council and the mayor determine makes the most sense for the city. Is that something that is that the city would consider?
Could I ask a follow-up question to Councilor Edwards? So do you mean that could go down, meaning the threshold could be reduced? Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand.
Well, may I, Councilor Arroyo?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
So my understanding is we are passing the version that is to be passed is allowing up to 2%, right? So for example, so within that, we got from 0.5, the report I sent around to some folks showed it could go as low as 0.0001 all the way to 2%. So if we choose 1% as the first year to see how this goes, and we decide not to do the maximum amount, we could go up or down from that based on our annual assessment. Just to be clear, we're putting in a cap. It won't go more than 2%, right? And it can't get less than 0, but that's the range we're choosing to pick, unless you want to put in language or the administration would like to always assure that there's a transfer fee. Therefore, the minimum is 0.01%, that we forever have that. I'm amendable. I'm fine with that. If you just want to have a very clear range that we can only go between this and every 3 years we will assess it. I don't know that there's ever a point where we may not want to assess it or say we just can't afford to have a transfer fee this year. I don't know, but this would allow us to have that flexibility. I mean, that's what I want. I think that makes sense. And I mean, to my counselors and to the city, wouldn't you want to be able to say this year we're waiving the transfer fee because our economy has gone into not good territory? Therefore, the transfer fee this year is waived or 0. I mean, it's not good for money, but it is the flexibility that I think that's why the minimums need to be very clear in the outline and maximum minimums. So those are my thoughts. And I'm not trying to cause more confusion. If I did, I apologize.
I see the commissioner has his hand raised. You can take floor there.
Yeah, so thank you, Councilor Arroyo. I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same section. So I think the section that we were talking about with the review for every 3 years was about the exemption level and not the amount of the amount of the transfer tax, like the percentage of the transfer tax. That part is in section 2. And I believe since that's established by ordinance of the city council after it's approved, that would also be able to be changed by the city council basically at any point and wouldn't require a review. And I think kind of the intention of having section 3 in there about exemption value is to make sure that the city council and the administration are kind of staying on top of that part and not forgetting about that part. And I think kind of the implication is that we would always be reviewing the percentage of the transfer fee and making sure that made sense in terms of revenue that we need for housing and how much is coming in and things like that and the impact on our constituents. So I agree with Councilor Edwards that it's important to kind of be able to have the flexibility to review that. And I think that flexibility is already in there, and it's just basically you could change it every month if you wanted to. Not that would necessarily be necessary, but it basically at any point in time, and it's not set on a schedule. At least that's how I read it.
So just to make this clear for folks who may be watching this, this is section 2, which directly refers to the transfer fee itself and the size of that transfer fee. And then there's a section 3 that deals with the exempted value, which deals with, at the moment, the first $2 million of a purchase price of any real property interest or the transfer of a controlling interest in a trust, limited liability company, or any other entity. And so those are 2 separate sections. I think what we are having a discussion about right now, and folks can correct me if I'm wrong, is whether or not we should be writing in the ability to change that fee, how much that fee is over time to deal with changing circumstances, which I believe the commissioner just said would likely be something that section 2, in his opinion, already allows us to do because it comes through the ordinance through the council. And then section 3 is the exemption of the value of this, which over time, if your property values go up, then maybe we're catching folks in this net we're not supposed to, and we would adjust accordingly. Currently, the way that this is written, it says that we would do that every 5 years. It gives us the option. It doesn't say we shall do it, so we may do it every 5 years based on the percentage increase of the median citywide sales prices for all properties, but shall not be reduced, meaning that the exemption will never go below the 2 million or whatever it ultimately is, but could go higher. I think the question is 2 questions here. Councilor Worrell raised a question about whether or not we can change the language in a way that allows us to evaluate it. I believe Councilor Flaherty also raised something similarly, but in terms of the timeline. So it's currently for 5 years. Could we do it for 3? And then the question specifically about adjusting the value. I think we came to the idea that saying evaluated rather than shall might make some sense. But also, just to be clear, for Councilor Edwards, whose hand's up, and I have a question about this, are you actually saying perhaps we might want to go under 2 million on the exemption at some point in the future, not just what the transfer fee is, because section 3 does deal with the 2 million and does say that that will never be reduced. So Councilor Edwards, I'm just going to give you the floor on that, on anything that you want as well.
No, I'm not interested in going below the 2 million. I think that's something I'm not interested in that. And I don't think our economic projections don't really allow for us to do that. The hand is up specifically as Commissioner, and I thank you for that clarification, Commissioner Arenello, about the adjustment of the fee itself. So for my clarification, when this passes at, and when it passes at the State House and it comes back to the City Council, for us to bake in an analysis about that fee in the limited range that we are going to be given between 0 and 2%. I'm assuming it is in that later conversation in the City Council that we're coming up with the triggers and the analysis for, okay, we're going to start at 1% for the first year, and we will look at X to determine if it goes up the following year, the following month, or following whatever years. We would do that at another time. I know you mentioned that based on it's written right now, we would be able to, we have the permission, or if it passed as is, we'd have the permission to do it. So the question of permission and ability, not so much my concern. The standards and how and the analysis is to go up, to go down, to implement, to not. And I'm assuming if it's your interpretation and the administration's is that analysis, that qualification can be baked in at the actual ordinance that we passed to implement the fee. I see you nodding, Tim. Okay, so then this is a premature conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to be clear, Councilor Worrell, was because this started off with your question, I want to make sure we don't short you on time or any of your concerns. Is there anything else you want to add to that, or do you feel like this is pretty much answered your questions?
My questions has been answered.
Thank you, Councilor Worrell. I believe up next is Councilor Murphy, followed by Councilor Braden.
Yep, thank you. I don't have any closing remarks, but I do want to thank my fellow colleagues for asking some great questions. And I know there's a lot of clarification that is needed and will continue to be needed, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Braden, if you have anything, any questions, any changes, any statements, period, this is the time. Thank you, Councilor.
No, I the one thing, in terms of the minimum, I don't think it should be 0. I think we're going to have ongoing needs for investment in our housing stock. Our existing affordable housing is in constant need of maintenance and repair. And in the absence of robust federal funding for housing, I think to set the transfer fee at zero is leaving money on the table that we should be able to use. And I also urge, I really hope we can get this done tomorrow, because our neighbourhood especially has been used as a piggy bank for developers who come in and get permitted projects. They go through the process of getting it permitted, and then they flip the project and make tens of millions of dollars in the transaction. And I'm really sick of it. And I think that this is something that will help us capture some of that money and put it to good use to invest in affordable housing in our city, and it's past due. So I'm hoping that this language in this particular home rule petition will meet past muster at the State House. I'm very happy that Councillor Edwards is up there to catch it. We'll be watching that catch with great attention, and we want to get this done as soon as possible. So thank you everyone, and thank you all for your participation this morning, and let's get this done. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Now that leaves me, and then what I will do is go through everybody who is here that raises their hand and would like to make any amendments or talk on any other piece that has come up through other testimony. But I hope folks feel that this is sort of popcorn style. If there's something that comes up, just raise your hand. We'll kick it right to you. My major issue here has already come up a couple of times, which is the general court's ability to amend it. And my thing here is, I prefer things to get done than not done at all, right? And so I am very aware of the analysis that this is what's required to get it done, and perfect shouldn't be the enemy of the good. But here's my question specifically that I don't know, and then one that I do know, if this isn't something that can happen. But in terms of the language to the petitions of the general court that currently lets the entire legislature create amendments to this as they so wish, is there a way to create language that restricts it just to the members of the legislature that represent Boston? I would be significantly less concerned about this if the only legislators who were allowed to tinker with this were folks who are elected to represent people of Boston and actually know Boston. So I saw some head nodding no, so I'm assuming we aren't allowed to restrict it in that way, or do we not?
Right. Yeah, so the home rule petition rules wouldn't allow that. They would have to go up.
Great, so I thought that would be the answer. I thought that would be the answer, but I figured I'd shoot that out there. Here's what I do think we could probably do. Right now, the way it's written, and I'm just gonna read it the way it's written, is ordered that a petition to the general court accompanied by a bill for special law relating to the city of Boston to be filed with an attesting copy of this order be and hereby is approved under clause 1 of section 8 of article 2 as amended of the articles of amendment to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, provided that the legislature may reasonably vary the form and substance, this is what gives them the ability to change it, of the requested legislation within the scope, and this is the language I would like to address, of the general public objectives of this petition. I would like to delete of the general public objectives of the petition and replace it with within the scope of the section 1 findings and purpose, which is what we have here, which I'll just read that to you, but it's section 1 of the actual thing. So instead of saying general public objectives, which to me sounds like anything that they want, it would instead restrict it to changes that are within the scope of section 1, which is finding and purpose. And I'll read that in its entirety now. Section 1, findings and purpose. The general court finds and declares that a serious state of emergency exists in the city of Boston with respect to housing, whereby there is an inadequate supply of affordable housing, which is impacting quality of life and public health, contributing to housing insecurity, rent burden, homelessness, and increasing evictions. That rising housing costs and speculative real estate practices disproportionately impact protected classes, including households of color, and further finds that imposition of a fee on certain real estate transfers shall be applied at the discretion of the city and with exemptions as detailed in this act in order to mitigate the impacts of speculative market practices through the production of affordable and deeply affordable housing and by discouraging rapid repeat sales of property. Additionally, outdated income and asset restrictions for senior tax exemptions are restricting exemption relief resulting in higher ownership costs and risking the displacement of vulnerable population. To me, making a reference to directly that section, which speaks to the entire purpose for this, is much more confined than just saying general public objectives, which could then be said to be housing period, or taxes period, or seniors period, and that's huge. Is there any objection to just changing the language of order so that instead of saying the scope of general public objectives of this petition, it says the section 1 findings and purposes of this petition? So within the scope of the section 1 findings and purposes of this petition, instead of within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition. Is there any objection to that minor change? To me, maybe it's major. You can tell me why it would be, but any objection?
Counselor, I'd have to check with legal on that. I'm not sure.
Happy to let you do that.
Yeah, I think that might set us up for an issue with like House Counsel or Senate Counsel up there. So happy to check with them and see if that's possible.
Well, I mean, since I couldn't just make it hype, but Boston legislature, the Boston legislature, I mean, that's the closest I could do, and I still think it gives away a whole lot. And then a second question that I have about the senior tax, sort of senior relief here. Yes, for the transfer tax, when the governor signs this, and I'm willing that as well, when the governor signs this, the transfer fee still has to be done by ordinance through us. The senior component of this, though, takes effect immediately, correct? Or does that come through an ordinance as well?
No, the senior component would not come through an additional ordinance. It would, depending on when it was enacted, it would take effect for the next fiscal year.
In other words, if for some reason the legislature wanted to edit that senior exemption in a way that actually I didn't agree with or the council didn't agree with, it wouldn't matter, because after we've given them the ability to write it up, they could still pass it and enact it without it bringing back, which is not true of the transfer fee. The transfer fee still has to come through us, but the senior part, if they edit that and they pass that, that's fine, correct?
I'm not sure what their motive would be, but
I don't either, but I never know what the legislature's motives are. I mean, you're talking, who knows that? I mean, but basically, I'm just saying, I just want to be clear that technically that aspect of it, which I agree with you, I don't know why they would go after seniors in a way that's negative, but I do want to just be clear that if they did that, there is no method right now. It just would happen, right? Like we wouldn't be able to do anything about that if for some reason they decided that the exemption should be lesser than what it currently is, or the relief should be lesser than it currently is. It would just, if it got signed, if it got passed, it's final. Is that correct? Yes? Okay. And so I hope they wouldn't go after seniors, but I just want to be clear because we've talked about the transfer fee coming back, which I think is important. The senior aspect of it wouldn't, it would just take effect. And I agree with you. I don't know why they would go after seniors, but I also can't say that they wouldn't, right? I have no idea what they're doing up there. And so just that point of order, if you can get back to me on the language change to whether or not we can make that small change. And then I see Councilor Baker has his hand raised, so I do want to give him a chance to speak. And then I'll open it back up to the rest of my council colleagues to give closing statements and or to continue to offer language or an amendment. Councilor Baker, the floor is yours.
So I'm still a little bit confused. If the state has language on their docket now that came down from the governor that speaks to this senior benefit, I would think that they would vote on that. So I'm not sure what would they take redundant votes? Maybe Neil, so how are they going to vote on their legislation and then our legislation? I think, and to get into some amendments, I'd like to see it stripped out. I'd like to see this just as the 2% transfer separated out, because we're putting something in that's really good, a benefit for the seniors, which we should be doing anyway. into something that in this time is a tax. So I'm very, very concerned about this. I think we should strip them out. I think we should bifurcate them, because I would tend to lean towards the state is going to vote on what they have in front of them now from the governor. And I would also like to see this affordable housing black hole that we have. I would like to see this way more prescriptive. I mean, $100 million going towards building actual units that the city of Boston controls. Why aren't we doing that? Like Councilor Edwards, Senator Edwards spoke about the housing trust, and I sat on the housing trust also, and she's absolutely right. It's $1 million going out here, $1 million going out here to highly connected, charged up developers, you know, that are in this game of building affordable housing. I think we need to, if it were prescriptive, if it were, we're going to use $40 million, $50 million, put a number on it, and we're gonna attach all of our assets that we have, city assets, and we're gonna attach the money to the city assets, and we're going to build units of housing that we could then turn over to places, pathways for places like Mahad to be able to buy these units. I'm just not comfortable with the city piling on money for affordable housing, when, again, how many times do I need to say it? And the new councils that are here, good luck trying to get someone into an apartment. Good luck, because you just can't do it. So how much money are we going to throw at this before someone of us can get someone an apartment? It's money after money after money. You know, what are we spending on ARPA money? Are we going to use any of that to build actual affordable units, or is it going to go into that iCloud, for lack of a better term, of affordable housing money? Not prescriptive enough for me. I would like to see if it's amendments, and I know I'm in another echo chamber here, that we won't bifurcate these. I think that the senior benefit needs to be cut out from this. We should be pursuing that on our own, or we should see what happens with we should be in communication with the state to see what's going to happen with that legislation that's up there now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Anyone else want to speak before we adjourn? You can just raise your hand if you would like to give a closing in any way, shape, or form. That goes to the administration as well, if you have any closing statements that you would like to make. But otherwise, we are going to adjourn. I thank everyone here for their time and for their thoughtful requests. I see that Councilor Louis-Jeanne raised her hand, so I will kick it to you right after this. But I do just want to say thank you to the administration for your time, for your efforts. Thank you to my colleagues for your time, for your efforts, and for your suggestions and thoughts. And now, Councilor Louis-Jeanne, if you have any questions or statements or anything you'd like to make.
Yeah, I want to say thank you as well. I just want to say that there have been several comments about this affecting like mom and pop, you know, homeowners. And it just seems to me, and I think other councils have spoken to this as well, it's going to really be, you know, those absentee investors and the flippers that really are going to be the targets of these transfers and so the transfer fee. And so I don't think that there's anybody among the city council that wants to go after, you know, regular homeowners here. We're talking about extracting the wealth that is the basis of the speculative market to do right by our residents and create more affordable housing. Just want to make, you know, there's no one, I'll speak for myself because I can't speak for everyone, that the support here is not trying to go after regular homeowners. It's really about the, you know, a lot of bad actors in the real estate industry here, and doing our part to make sure that we are building and working towards a city where our working class families have places where they can live. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councilor Louis-Jeanne. And I think that's everybody. I see no more hands. And I just want to thank everybody. This working Sheila Dillon, Chief Dillon. I don't know why.
I just want to say very quickly, I think it was a good hearing, and this was a very good working session. And I really appreciate everyone reading this and really getting into the details. And I think it was really a helpful discussion. I just want to thank the city councilor and you for holding such a good hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Neil, I would ask that you get back to me as quickly as you can from legal on that change, because the hope is to put this up on Wednesday for a vote. So the sooner the better on that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.